Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Chillin With The Villain. Happy birthday to you. Voice of an angel. I'm singing happy birthday because, of course, the 1 year anniversary of the Chillin With The Villain. Can you believe it? We made it a whole year. It didn't miss 1 week, 52 episodes. This is episode number 52 of the Chillin With The Villain podcast. 1 year on. Sam, can you Adam and Eve it?
Honestly, I can't. I'm very pleasantly surprised with us. Yep. We haven't argued for a year. We haven't, we've come up with some good ideas for an entire year. Well, you are an ideas man, so that's easy for you, right? And we've had an audience for a year, growing audience for a year. Pretty crazy stuff.
Crept up on us.
Stuff. And it also, it's kind of scary, right?
I did not realize at all.
I know until I told you the other day. Yeah, we're looking at the episode numbers. We're like, hang on a minute.
People ask, how long have you been doing the podcast for? And I think my normal answer is 3 months.
A couple of months, yeah.
A whole year, though. So, to people listening, if this is your first time listening, then hello, welcome. Thank you for joining the show. And if you're an OG chillin', if you've listened since the very beginning, then big shout outs to you. Lots of love to you. I probably should introduce us, shouldn't I? Just assuming that you all know who we are, which you probably do, but it's a podcast. I should probably do the whole deal. I am the villain, Marty Skill, professional wrestler of 20 years, and a massive pro wrestling fan. And joining me, as always, is my co-host, the producer of the show, Mr. Samuel Scott. And Sam, I have received a message from one of our very loyal fans on Instagram. He sent us a DM on the Instagram, which you can all do, by the way, at the Villain Pod. His name is Adam Whitaker. I'm sure you've seen him before on the Instagram, Sam. It's a very, he listens to the show. He's great. We love Andy. And he said, congratulations on a whole year of podcasting. I can honestly say it's the only podcast I've listened to from episode 1 and never missed an episode. There have been some mega episodes, but I think the interview with Downtown Bruno was epic. The fact he was just chilling, eating chicken and drinking beer made me laugh. Look forward to the shenanigans. Look forward to what shenanigans you get up to over the next 12 months and beyond. If I could give it more than a 5-star review, I totally would. Well, Dave Meltzer gives more than 5 stars for wrestling matches, so you can give us a 7.5.
Give us a 7-star. Yeah, very good. Thank you, Andy. I like how you were going to skip the intro and introducing who we are and go straight to somebody gassing us up.
If the whole podcast could be like that. Hey, dude, I've had my fair share of criticism. And now I'm gonna try and even the playing field with some love. Okay, it's the 1 year anniversary.
Yeah, nothing wrong with it. It's not birthday. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's my birthday, and I'll cry if I want to. And today we do have a special episode because we have the season finale of Who Killed WCW. If you've been listening for the last 3 weeks, you'll know that we've been covering the Who Killed WCW series by Vice and The Rock's $7 Productions and the guys from Dark Side of the Ring. So let's not waste any more time, Sam. Let's get back into it. Now, I'm just going to start by saying this is probably... So my critique of the show so far, we've quite enjoyed the show, but my critique, if you've listened to the last 3 weeks, has kind of been, I've heard all this stuff before. I've seen all this stuff before. This story has been told. What is this series offering? So I got very excited at the start of this episode when it comes up saying we have footage from backstage from the last ever episode of WCW Nitro, never seen before footage. I thought, this is what we've been waiting for this whole series. In my head, I thought, did they just have this footage and thought, let's make a 4-part series around it? As we got through the episode, I don't think that was the case, but I guess we'll get to that.
When I saw those words come up on the screen, I was going to message you. I was like, I know who's going to be happy to hear this.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And we did see at first quite some interesting clips. Saw one of your favorites, Dustin Rhodes, a goatee, and he's reading a format out, and he says like, "Oh, Vince McMahon's segment to open the show." Like that was a pretty cool moment, which I've never seen before. But we saw some highlights of different wrestlers talking to camera. I think from that last ever Nitro, including Jimmy Yang, who he said, I guess one person at Turner doesn't think wrestling is cool, and he's going to ruin it for millions of people. We see Chris Kanyon, which I thought was interesting. And then the start of this documentary, or this episode, essentially is about the AOL and Turner Broadcast merger, and AOL getting 55% and Turner getting 45%, basically suggesting that, well, not suggesting anything, that Ted Turner, that owns Turner Broadcast, doesn't have the majority anymore, and essentially can be...
Yeah, he loses that influence, like he's outvoted, basically.
Outvoted, yeah, that's the word I was looking for. And I think essentially that's what this whole episode is is about. And realistically, this is sort of the main reason I think that WCW died. What are your memories, Sam, of AOL? Because I know my father used to have AOL, and I used to quite enjoy going into the AOL chat rooms when I was a kid and talking wrestling in there. So that's my memories of AOL. What about you, Sam?
I remember the AOL chat rooms, which I didn't have, but a friend had AOL. So I used to go around and we used to talk to people on AIM, AOL Instant Messenger. And the other thing I remember about AOL is you were just bombarded with CDs through the post. Like, do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was AOL, when they used to give you a free CD to get up and running with AOL. But it was just prolific junk mail.
Isn't it? So in this documentary, they're suggesting that AOL, well, because of the way it merged, are they suggesting that AOL was a bigger company than Turner Broadcast? Because I guess at the time they assumed that it would be, but AOL didn't last that long, huh?
I think what it is it's not that the length of time that they were around, it was when they were around, right? Because that's when the internet started like really taking off in like households, right? And they were just the provider at the time. So it was just the right place, right time. I think that's all what it was down to.
It was kind of alarming, I thought, when Ted Turner's son, who they have as a talking head on the show, surprisingly, says that his father never used the internet or even had a phone or anything else. That's pretty crazy to think, right? But he also, this whole merger and AOL, I think AOL had its issues. Ted Turner's son suggests that this would maybe be like a Ponzi scheme. I thought that was kind of out there. And then Brad Siegel says, even though they had this merger, he said WCW at the time was broken. The ratings had gone down. He said it was broken and I had to fix it. And I thought, blimey, well, that's another reason why the company didn't work. If you were the guy, or you were going to be the guy to fix WCW. Then they talk about how much WCW's business had gone down. They tell us, which I didn't know, actually. This is something I did not know. Well, maybe I did, but they said that so 1999 Uncensored and Uncensored 2000, both headlined by Hogan and Flair. The 1999 version did 325,000 buy rate, which is a
pretty really good number, man.
Healthy buy rate. It's a great buy rate compared to the year 2000, which we know was super hot for the WWE. They did 60,000. So they dropped. What's the math on that, Sam?
According to Guy, 81%.
Is that correct?
Yep.
That's a pretty significant.
That's disgusting. Yeah.
Well, also, I think, dude, the WWE's business was so hot in 99 and 2000. What are you doing headlining with Flair versus Hogan? I mean, I can see WWE doing Hogan versus Flair in the year 2003 or whenever it was. I think they did do it, but they could do that, but it wasn't the headliner, and they could do it because their business was so strong and they had the strong main eventers. But when your business is going down the toilet, you're going to try and do Hogan and Flair in the year 2000. I'm not trying to take anything away from those.
No, totally. But that sounds more like one of those Legends matches.
Right. Like
main.
That was your big attempt to like, well, that didn't.
And they did it twice.
It's like, I don't know. I know they did it in 1994 when we reviewed that at the Bash of the Beach, wasn't it? And even in 1994, it kind of felt a little late to do that
Right,
match.
yeah.
I know this, the year 99, it's kind of crazy to think that that's only 5 years later. But in the scheme of things of wrestling, it seems like a whole lifetime difference, don't you think? Like the difference between 1994 and 99 is huge.
Oh, worlds apart, yeah. And they did Hogan versus Flair the first time round. It was, I'm not saying I know what you think about how I think about gimmicks, but the first one was a cage match. So there was an element of spectacle on it. The second time around, without the cage, so it's just the same thing we've seen again, but with less spectacle. 2 years in a row. Just, I don't know. It was baffling, absolutely baffling. Going back to Brad Siegel and his comment, I knew I knew when he said that comment that you would pick up on that. He seems to, I don't know if you got this opinion on him, and maybe I'm way off, but he seems to be quick to attach his name, like attach himself like a limpet to WCW when there's like any slight level of glory involved. But then when something goes awry, he wants to distance himself, like as in like, oh, I wasn't the guy for that. It seems like Bischoff owns both, and in fact, actually everybody does. Russo owns both, but Brad Siegel,
Russo, does he?
Well, in a more bullish way, yeah. No, I get your point.
I think the memes on the internet
spins it. Yeah, okay.
The memes on the internet have been that this show is essentially a bunch of middle-aged white men blaming each other.
Yes, which is what I like about it, and that's my criticism of this latest episode. There wasn't so many like interpersonal like beefs as much. There were a couple, but as much. It was more everyone. It was more WCW versus AOL Turner or WCW versus WWF. There wasn't more kind of like lower level interpersonal conflicts, and which is what I enjoyed about episodes 1 to 3. Right,
and most people tended to agree that the executives at Turner were kind of the heels in this whole ordeal.
Right, yeah. So we knew where this was, especially you, knew where this was going to culminate, right? This series or the story of WCW. So we didn't have like any real surprises, but obviously apart from you got your never before seen footage. Incidentally, could you tell? Like, could you see the footage and be like, "Oh, that's the footage I've never seen before"? Could you tell which one?
Yeah,
it was? I'm sure it's all like the backstage and like table read stuff. Yeah.
Well,
but apart from that, there was nothing else. Like we didn't really. It lacked none of the personal drama. It was just like business versus business, which is still fun, but we knew it was going to go there, and I just feel like it didn't have as much energy to this episode as the rest. But that's just me.
I want to touch upon the footage in a second. There's online. The reception to this series is basically being called a series to rehab Eric Bischoff. Did you get that impression from this show?
I get what they mean by that, but did he really need it? Like, he seems to be doing all right anyway, right? He's got his podcast. He seems like a happy guy. He seems like he knows what he's doing. He seems like he's enjoying himself. He's got a family. I didn't think so. I think it's kind of well known that I feel like, I don't know, you'll know better than me, but surely like the majority of the wrestling community like think of Bischoff with a thumbs up.
Well, I think he's very much a Marmite. I think he's very much either people love him or people hate him. Oh yeah, because he's very critical of AEW these days. So obviously that audience doesn't like him. And
gotcha.
So yeah, I think a lot of the older guys that do podcasts, the fans either love them or hate them. Whether it's Conan and Disco, whether it's Jim Cornette, whether it's Russo, they're very
polarizing.
Absolutely. But
I never got that idea of not liking somebody because they criticize something that you like. If somebody's criticizing something that you like, they should be your friend because they're trying to improve what you like.
We're living in a generation when, well, maybe it's not even our generation, but a time where people will fall out with you if you have different opinions to them.
Very tribal times, yeah.
It is. People always talk about the tribalism in wrestling, but I feel like that's just kind of a way of life now. And I try really, really hard not to live by that rule. And I like to surround myself with people that have different opinions to mine, and I like to discuss it, and I'm very willing to be persuaded otherwise. Do you know what I mean?
I love being checked.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's
totally.
You've known me for years. I'm sure there's loads of things you've thought or you've talked to me about and I've ended up changing my mind on. That's kind of the beauty of discussion, right?
Yeah, but that's because we talk in the real world. Imagine if we only talked over Twitter.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
On Reddit, yeah.
Right. So, yeah, it is, and especially not liking someone because they don't like the same wrestling as you is kind of, yeah. I mean, we try to keep everything on this show very straight and narrow. I don't feel like we have a bias on this show. If there's stuff we like, we say about it. If there's stuff we don't like, we'll talk about it, but we'll explain why we don't like it. And we won't we're not going to throw insults or call anyone names or anything like that. We're just going to explain, okay, and we'll typically suggest, okay, we saw what they were going for, but this didn't work for me because of this reason. But I can see why people get wound up by these personalities, and a lot of the times the statements they're coming out with are normally big statements. That's probably why they make more headlines than we do. Do you know what I mean? Because they really, and maybe they're doing that by design, and I can't criticize that either, because these are guys that had their runs in wrestling and now they're able to make livings and money from sitting at home talking about it. So, and I think it's cool, because I just think, well, these are veterans that I would have liked to have maybe worked with at some point and learned from. And, actually, some of them I've met and worked with, but it's like I can get that knowledge now just from listening to them. And again, not everything they say I'm going to agree with, but I think it's kind of cool to have that source, to have that option there. So I'm not hating at all. But yeah, essentially this whole episode is about the merger with AOL and Turner Broadcast. And then honestly, so this episode was definitely the most different one yet, or this episode definitely had the most information that I've never really gone too deeply into. Honestly, I kind of got a little bit lost during this. Because essentially, so a bunch of stuff happens. Bischoff suggests selling WCW's. Brad Siegel says, no, we don't sell here at Turner, we buy. There's the .com recession. AOL stock drops by 50%. Ted Turner becomes the vice chairman. So again, like I said, he doesn't really have any control over WCW anymore. Brad Siegel then does ask Bischoff to find a buyer. Bischoff tries to shop around to sell this company. He ends up making a deal. Was it Fusion Media? A group of guys.
Oh, yes. Free.
He does. It's funny because Bischoff, he does discuss, because so since this show, there's been a lot of questions about Bischoff, and a lot of people in here kind of lying or not telling the right stories. What I will say is this. So because Bischoff talks about having a full-time location at Las Vegas at the Hard Rock, which I feel like would have been awesome personally. But he also talks about doing essentially a rebrand or a reboot with the company and doing a pay-per-view on May 6th called The Big Bang. And I do remember seeing that being advertised in the WCW magazine. So they must have had intentions to do this Big Bang show. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
and I like the graphic design of their posters, their flyers. Look pretty sleek.
I was excited for it. I remember being a kid and seeing the advertising.
I thought if they're going to rebrand like that, like it's going to be a cool look. It's going to be
smart.
So. Yeah,
I thought so. And they talk about Jamie Kellner being a TV executive that hate wrestling, who I think passed away this week. Actually, you sent me the article about that.
Yes, he did. Yeah,
I wasn't. Again, I was a little bit lost in this. It all seemed a little bit complicated. And I think the reason why is because lots of people are telling lots of different stories. But essentially, Bischoff thought he had the deal done for like $60 million. But then a guy called Stu Snyder came in basically to help the WWE purchase WCW. But I think the reason why
he was the WWE president of, like, I guess, acquisitions or something at the time.
Yes,
right? Like
and he was friends with Brad Siegel.
Right. Yes, which is important.
But I think the deal kind of fell through with Bischoff because they realized that it didn't have the TV deal attached to it. And Bischoff's been famous in saying, like, WCW without the TV rights or without the TV deal is essentially worth $20. Like, what are you buying? I didn't realize this either. So WWE bought WCW for, I think it was like $4.3 million. Well, what I didn't realize is they actually purchased them for something like 2.8, and then the other 1.4 or whatever was for the TV, for the library, which I thought was interesting because I thought the only real reason they would want to buy WCW was because of the library.
Right, totally. And also, isn't it kind of very weird to think that something that you've seen growing up and you enjoy so much with millions of fans and everything, like your dentist could have bought?
No, 100%. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories over this and about,
like that valuation seems...
Dude, in this day and age, like, you wouldn't even get that great of a house for $4 million.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
There's a lot of conspiracy theories and it doesn't really seem to add up. Like, how did this company that produced so much money and like I think 1 year produced, $250 million or something, how was it sold for $4 million? So I was all a little bit confused about the whole matter.
Me too. Did you figure out like how much the footage or whatever you want to call it, how much they were selling that for separate?
Well, like I said, I think Vince bought it for something like 1.6 million or something. Not a lot. And realistically, I would have thought that'd be more valuable than buying WCW.
The company.
I think WCW would have been very valuable for WWE. I mean, they've definitely made their money back very, very quickly from WCW, but they could have made millions and millions and with that whole, either keeping WCW alive and running the show or doing the proper invasion angle, which we've reviewed on this show before, was just a complete mess, but we won't get into that right yet. The week before Nitro, this is something I don't think maybe I did see, but I kind of forgot, where they have, I believe it's Booker T out there, Ric Flair's in the ring with Scott Steiner, and like Eric Bischoff's on the phone, basically suggesting that next week may be the last ever Nitro. It was all a bit of a mess. In this footage of the last ever Nitro, first of all, maybe we should review the first ever Nitro. That's a good idea, right? Or the last ever Nitro, sorry. Them taping in Panama City just, to me, kind of looked Bush League. I think it was... We
should review the first Nitro and the last Nitro just to see like they're about as rinky-dink as each other. How depressing would that be?
What I did think was funny with this footage, we do see our boy Mark Jindrak in the ring and he's kind of goofing off, and it's so funny because the more I've got to know Jindrak, he is kind of like that. He just likes to goof off.
Yeah.
So it's so funny to see old footage of him like doing
just
it there.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
Right. We've interviewed Mark Jindrak on the show before, so you go back in the archives to listen to that. And a few weekends ago, I got the chance to wrestle him in Mexico a couple of times, and that was just really, really fun. So it was cool to see him on here. I'll be honest with you. So they made a big deal about having this backstage footage from the last ever Nitro, and I was very excited. I thought, oh, finally, I'm going to see something that I haven't seen before.
Yeah.
There wasn't really anything to it. They did say that Shane McMahon had a short meeting with the whole roster. It would have been amazing if we could have seen that. But realistically, we didn't really see anything other than a few shots of wrestlers walking backstage, right?
Well, there were a few shots of wrestlers exclaiming their thoughts at the time, like in real time at the time, which is kind of interesting, right? So that's good behind the scenes, I think. Aside from that, I'm going to tend to agree with you. Yeah,
it wasn't anything.
So you take anything, right? Like you were desperate for something new content. Yeah. So
yes,
there's still some stuff to be found in it. Yeah, for sure. But it wasn't as not groundbreaking, but it wasn't as explosive or revealing as the start of the caption at the start made it seem. Yeah. Which is fine.
Sure. Booker T says no one knew about it till the day.
Yeah.
Obviously, since last week, we're not too sure how much we believe Booker T, but I think that is actually quite genuine. I think a lot of people didn't know to the day that would be the last ever Nitro. And it feels like Booker T had the best sort of attitude going into it because he says, to me, I was auditioning and there's no chance anyone else thought like that. But Booker T was like, yeah, he said, I was probably the only guy there that was excited. I thought that was really interesting.
He had a great attitude. Yeah, oh yeah, totally.
And who went on to be the most successful one?
Right, Booker T.
By far, right?
Booker T defense time. He came out and said that he feels like they chopped up his words in this documentary. So that's why we don't believe him so much. Yeah, and that's why he constantly put out that thing that he did 4 hours. Remember when we were recording the episode and then he came out with that statement that contradicted the documentary? Did that on purpose to show that they're putting words in his, or just cutting him up to miscategorize what he's trying to say, sort of thing. Either unintentionally or intentionally, we don't know. But he wasn't too happy about that.
That's why it's difficult doing these sort of shows. This happens a lot. Like I feel like if I was asked to do one of these, I'd always think twice because, again, stuff like this seems to happen more regularly than you would think. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Kevin Nash. I do think Nash has come out with some lines in this whole series, which kind of made me didn't make me feel any certain way, but I thought maybe didn't make him come across as the best. He definitely said during this kind of, I think it was about when he was booking, but when he essentially said like, well, I didn't care. Like my check was exactly the same either way. Do you know what I mean? So, and that was kind of the problem with WCW is that no one really cared because they were getting paid the same no matter what.
They had no incentive.
Yeah. And he also says when he's talking about the last ever Nitro, which he was not at, which he announces during this, he says that he thought, like watching it, he thought it was pathetic. He said, oh, people turned up to sink on the Titanic. He's like, no, thank you. I'll watch it from home. And I thought, well, I don't know. Again, you could have Booker T's attitude.
Yeah.
Which was
or Kevin Nash's. Kevin Nash reminded me of almost like my granddad, like a grumpy old man by that point.
Yeah. And I guess he knew, well, if he was there or not, it wouldn't affect him in terms of if he could turn up to WWE. But it is interesting to see that his post WWE run and Booker T's run, obviously Booker T's was a lot better than Nash's. He had a couple of runs after this, I think, right? He did the one with the NWO. Then he came back years later, had that ladder match with CM Punk. But when he came back,
remember that.
Yeah. His post NWO stuff or post WCW stuff, should I say, Nash in WWE just wasn't really good. And it's a shame as well because Big Star is Diesel. We all love Kevin Nash, but for whatever reason, after WCW, just did not work for Kevin Nash in the WWE. Bill DeMott, we see having a talk. Well, not a talking head. It's actually footage from the last ever Nitro saying about how today feels like we're leaving or graduating college. They do talk about all the production team losing their jobs and how they were sad for them. And I think that was obviously, kind of a big deal. The wrestlers, they can get other jobs. Probably a little bit harder for production teams to get jobs, at least in wrestling anyway. I think a lot of these people went on to work for TNA at least. Conan, again, asking the smart questions. He just questioned, like, how did this company essentially sell for nothing? And they do pick up on this show about the conspiracy theory of, like, is it an inside job? They do mention Bob Ryder posting a whole thing online about the conspiracy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
between
did you find
Brad
that?
and
Right.
Yeah. And what was the guy's name again? Stu Snyder?
Stu Snyder, yeah.
Yeah. Almost like a whistleblowing event, which was kind of interesting. What was interesting is Vice, or whoever the producers are, I wouldn't say they tried to take Brad Siegel to town on it, but they did question his collusion, like the possible theory of a collusion attempt, right? With, I can't remember his name again, Stu Snyder?
Yes.
Yeah. What did you find, like, how did you think about that part where they actually, like, the producers did say, hey, what about this stuff that, and again, the guy's name, what was his name, the whistleblower guy?
You're talking about Stu Snyder or Kellner?
No, the guy who made the post.
Oh, Bob Ryder.
Bob Ryder. Yeah, they questioned Brad Siegel about Bob Ryder's theory, which I didn't, I wasn't too sure if they were going to actually, like.
Yes.
I thought, what I mean is, I thought maybe Brad Siegel might be like, hey, I'm going to agree to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not talk about the possible collusion, conspiracy theory thing. But they did bring it up to him. What do you think about that part?
Well, yeah, I thought good. That's great that they're trying to dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
Someone, I can't remember who, but someone suggests that they thought Brad Siegel convinced Kellner to essentially take the TV distribution out of the deal, which essentially made it worthless to Bischoff and whatnot, but not necessarily to WWE. So the whole, again, I end up getting a little bit kind of lost during this. During it all, Brad Siegel says, well, we just, I regret that we couldn't find the right story or the right players to turn it around, like when ratings were down. I was like, just shut up, Siegel. You had great players there. Do you know what I mean? Like, you did. The whole thing was just just a mess. And there's the idea that he thought that the right story could have saved that company.
Right.
Is
like
just
it's
so
creative.
ridiculous.
Yeah. Like they got any hand in. Yeah. That was
like,
crazy.
To me, that kind of, I mean, I get the wrestlers are all blaming the executives. So then, of course, the executive is blaming the wrestlers.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm on the side of the wrestlers, but come on. Like, I just thought that was it was kind of tone deaf, if anything.
Yeah, as however he came across to us or what we think about him, I am grateful that he actually agreed to do this so we could hear his side. I think that's pretty cool.
No,
he could have just said no.
100%. Did you Booker T again? Booker T came across like the hero in this because he was pretty much the only wrestler that agreed to take a big ass pay cut to go to the WWE. Imagine that. He agreed to take half the money to work rather than the full amount to not work. Pretty interesting, huh? But it paid off.
Shows a lot about his character, like not his characters in like his wrestling character, his internal character. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think he still hadn't had that big run. He still hadn't had a chance yet in the WWE. He was still young enough. I feel like that was a great.
He had momentum right at the time, like coming in from because he was pretty hot in WCW at that time, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And plus,
wanted to run with it.
The fact that they didn't bring in all the big stars at the same time probably worked out good for Booker T.
Yeah.
More spotlight on him. So they cover the whole WWE buying WCW, the whole invasion angle, which obviously did not work out. That's been covered to death at this point.
Even by us.
Even by us. This is where it does kind of turn into the Eric Bischoff rehab show. Because Bischoff becomes the general manager of Raw. And I guess this is kind of a part of the story, but they even talk about when Bischoff essentially was he fired or let go as the general manager? And they talk about how they called him up and they wanted John Cena to throw him in a garbage truck. And Bischoff said, no, I want it to be Vince. And it's all very kind of like, it is a little bit like essentially like an Eric Bischoff documentary at this point. I guess they needed to have protagonist during this whole show, so I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, they try to paint him as like the hero until the end. You know what I mean?
They do. And then, like towards the end, they essentially get kind of like a straight answer from a lot of the talking heads on who killed WCW, and I think we can all agree that the question "Who killed WCW" is a little silly, but obviously it's made to kind of get a reaction out of people because we can't blame it on one person, can we? That just seems so silly. But we get the talking heads. Conan basically suggests that it's attorney executives, which the majority of people all tend to agree. But he also suggests that it was the top guys not wanting to work with the mid-card wrestlers.
How do you feel about that?
I am not sure because I'm sure there was a part of that. I'm sure there was some top guys that didn't want to work with mid-card guys, but I feel like a lot of the mid-carders did work with mid-card guys. I mean, obviously everyone worked with Goldberg to bring him up to the top. People worked with Paul White, the Giant, to bring him up to the top. Like Macho Man put over DDP, and then they all worked with DDP. Later on, Scott Steiner climbed the ranks. Booker T climbed the ranks. I don't really know. Even later on, Hogan did a bunch of jobs for people. He jobbed
Billy Kidman, you said,
right?
Yeah.
And maybe Mike Awesome. Could they have done a better job in bringing more of those mid-card acts into the main event? Absolutely. Guys like Guerrero, Jericho, and Mysterio, Conan, all those guys. Yes, but I don't know how I feel about that one. Typically, again, I guess I'm always just kind of biased towards the wrestlers, but in any wrestling company, the top guys kind of, they decide they don't decide who they work with, but they have some kind of say. Do you know what I mean? It's not like Stone Cold Steve Austin never refused to work with anyone. There's plenty of people that he refused to work with. He refused to work with Jeff Jarrett, refused to work with Billy Gunn, refused to work with Mark Mero. I think he refused to work with China. So I don't know about that. I don't know if it's about necessarily them refusing to work with the mid-card, maybe more just there was a lot of talent that WCW could have pushed but didn't into the main event. Yeah. But is that something that killed WCW? I do remember being a kid and thinking that WCW was all the old wrestlers. I do remember that.
Yes,
Thinking like,
yeah.
oh, old Flair, old Hogan, old Piper, old Sid, all all the wrestlers I watched as a little kid. Now I'm like a young teenager thinking that. So I guess there is maybe some truth to that. Brad Siegel, just to continue himself coming across as an idiot, says he suggests that WCW killed WCW. And I was just like, thanks for offering nothing. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, wasting the time on that one.
He couldn't respond. He couldn't take any responsibility whatsoever. Nash suggests that he's never seen someone take less responsibility than Brad Siegel. So that was a good line from Kevin Nash. Booker T suggests that it was Bischoff, and Brett says that it was Bischoff and Russo. I don't know. I guess Bischoff can take a part of the blame of things going wrong, but at the same time, he kind of has to get all the credit for
steering the ship in the right direction. And yes, totally. Yeah.
And
I agree.
Actually, that leads, I had to wait 4 episodes and to the very last few minutes of this whole series. Legit, my favorite part or my favorite scene of the whole entire series is the scene where Bischoff is watching Kevin Nash on the screen put Eric Bischoff over, and Nash essentially says, which I've heard him say before, people can say what they want about Eric Bischoff, but he's the only person that can honestly say that they defeated Vince McMahon at Pro Wrestling for 83 weeks, and no one can take that away from him. And Bischoff is watching it, and he starts to choke up, and I actually I was getting a little choked up almost, and I thought, wow, that to me that's what I wanted this whole entire series, just new content, stuff we've not seen before, a moment. I wish they would have held that shot longer on Bischoff because he starts to choke up and they go straight into a video package. He's talking over it still, but I was like, just keep the shot on him. In Beyond the Mat when Roland Alexander is talking about Mike Modest being too big to be a cruiserweight, too small to be a heavyweight, and he starts to choke up and they just keep that long shot on him. It's perfect. Amazing, I wanted the same thing with this Eric Bischoff shot.
Yeah. And he's watching this, and you do see it's cut in his face, and he's tearing up. And then after Kevin Nash or the clip ends, he takes it in for a bit, and then just goes, "Cool." He can't he suppresses gratitude more. He's more of a boast when he's talking about what he can own, his failings. But when there's stuff saying good things coming towards him, he seems to suppress it. An interesting character trait, I think. Seems quite modest.
Kind of opposite to Russo, huh?
Oh yeah, totally. Which is great. And that's why wrestling, and by extension this documentary, is great, right? Is because you just get so many different types of larger than life characters. They're not all cookie cutter.
Speaking of cookie cutter, we also do get The Rock here at the end.
Oh yeah.
He shouts out his best friend, who's also one of our best friends, Downtown Bruno. And he suggests that Bruno, years ago when he first started the business, again, everything The Rock says kind of sounds like a promo, don't you think?
Does.
Right? It's a bit, it is a bit
rehearsed, bit canned, bit false.
It's almost like they said to him, we need a good line to kind of close this series. Can you think of something? And this is what he came up with. It didn't seem too genuine, but he says that Downtown Bruno, who we've interviewed on the show, by the way, you can go back in the archives. And
great episode.
Great episode of Bruno eating fried chicken and drinking beer, talking with the
in the bathroom.
In the bathroom. Yeah. He says that Downtown Bruno told him that there's a line, you going home, the big run's over. And at first I was like, what is he talking about? What does that mean? And what he actually said to The Rock was, eventually you're going to hear these words, going home, the big run's over. And I think it's essentially saying that everything good comes to an end at some point.
Yeah, know when to leave on a high sort of thing, I think. Know when to quit sort of
nothing
thing.
Lasts forever, essentially. Yeah. And I think that's right. That's the kind of way I look at it with WCW. That's why I think it's a bit of a shame how the narrative behind WCW is always who killed it and like it died. To me, it's just like anything else. There was TV shows.
It had a lifetime.
That had its, or at one point, Backstreet Boys or NSYNC were the biggest boy band or the biggest act in the world. And they have their run, and then they're not. But should we make every NSYNC documentary
be about
who killed NSYNC?
Totally.
Or do we just celebrate the fact that they were a thing? And that's all WCW. Obviously, WWE is like, it's its own thing. It's a matter like the fact that it's lasted all these years. But typically, you think about it, every other wrestling company ever, pretty much, other than New Japan, CMLL, AAA, and now AEW, they've all gone out of business at some point. That's just the way it goes, right? So, yeah, I thought that was, they tried to include The Rock in this, but
give him something to do.
I think I heard that they tried to get Ric Flair, which would have made a lot of sense, but they also had the Dark Side of the Ring guys who did that whole episode.
Oh, the plane
Flair. So obviously it wasn't going to work out with Flair. It definitely felt like there was a lot of talking heads. They did do quite a good job, didn't they? I guess in getting some of the executives from Turner and whatnot. Actually,
Brad Siegel was a good get. I think
it was. It was. And Bischoff does admit at the end that his memories all blur together. I think this is to cover the fact that a lot of times he kind of doesn't exactly give the whole truth or whatnot.
Right.
But why let the truth get in the way of a good story? But overall, this to me was probably, I was going to say the best episode. I don't know if that's a correct way to describe it, but it gave us the most unique and new content.
Yeah.
It went more in depth than the other episodes, and it was less about the wrestling side and more about the business and just going into stuff that had never really been covered before in a documentary like this. So that I really enjoyed. What say you, Sam?
Okay, I had a feeling that this might be one of your, if not your favorite episode. For me, I feel like it wasn't weak, but it was my weakest episode because it lacked a lot of like I said earlier, the interpersonal relationships. If anything, it was more like a finance or business documentary.
Right.
Was the thing. And like, that's fine, but I didn't expect 3 episodes of kind of like drama and then 4th episode be, the tone was the same, but like the content was a little bit different and it made it, you had to like consume it differently, right?
You had to focus on this, right?
Yeah, you had to really, and I think even in all of our last 3 reviews, I said like these are easy watches. This one wasn't. Like they required you to work on that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I don't think for someone like me who doesn't really want to have to think too hard when it comes to a wrestling documentary, because I'm pretty casual, may have lost its audience a little bit, but it was still interesting. It was still good. You still had the personal and emotional moments. Eric Bischoff with his tablet watching Kevin Nash. Where meanwhile Booker T, who comes across as a nice guy, blames Eric Bischoff. So there still was all of that stuff.
Yeah.
For me, I think it was the weakest, but it was also the end of it. That's it. Like this is the final episode, so we got. They closed the door. I think successfully. I'm just felt like it's a little bit too convoluted in the way they told what they chose to tell the story of. But if they did want to end it with the bad guy of being the corporation, which of course they would, and why wouldn't they? And we knew that they would, and we think that's fair. It does probably need quite a bit of the details. So it's kind of like damned if they do, damned if they don't sort of thing. So I understand that. I don't have any ways, like any criticism of like, I don't know how they could have made that different or better. I just feel like it lost me a little bit, but it was still good. It was still a fine watch.
Yeah. Maybe it needed some more wrestling experts to give us the details, because a lot of people involved, it seems like they had obviously going to have biases, but their memories. Yeah, and it's 25 years ago. Maybe if we had some kind of expert there to kind of explain everything, that maybe.
So you mean more people like that guy, like the author, like more like outside pundits or historians, or
even maybe not Dave Meltzer, but like that kind of line. There's people that would have covered.
Chase covered it at the time. Yeah,
they would have covered everything every day. They probably still got all the information, and I don't know. Maybe that would have helped. Maybe not. I don't know.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, let us know what you think. Years ago, I don't know if you remember, Sam, but WWE did a documentary on ECW. I think it was called The Rise and Fall of ECW, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was very popular, and it led to them doing an ECW reunion show.
One Night Stand.
One Night Stand, which is very popular. I feel like everyone's going to be a bit of on a WCW high right now from this little series. Obviously, this series wasn't produced by WWE. Did get me thinking though, if they try to do a WCW reunion show now, I don't think they could do it, huh? No, they couldn't really. No,
it wouldn't mean anything.
Well, no, it would mean something. I'm just saying the talent. They can't get any of the talent, huh?
Oh yeah, that's
too old.
That's true.
Like the ECW reunion, it's kind of funny when you think about it. It was only done 4 years after ECW had finished.
Right, but now this is what 23. Yeah.
23 years. I'm trying to think if there's any talent that could even do it. I'm sure Flair would love to wrestle again. Probably not a great idea. I'm sure Hogan would like to wrestle again. Jericho's with AEW.
Yeah. It wouldn't work.
There's no one to wrestle. It's a shame, isn't it? Because I feel like WCW never really got its kind of big send off, if that makes sense.
It didn't. Yeah.
It had this depressing last
a little bit,
episode.
Yeah.
And then it got bitched by WWE. It never really got that, like, this flowers and that hurrah.
No, it didn't. It didn't. And when I say it wouldn't mean anything, what I mean is, even if they did do it, which they wouldn't be able to because of the reasons you laid out, it would seem kind of like cynical, I think, because of like, hey, let's just do what we did for ECW for WCW. So I think,
I think people would accept that. I don't think
you do.
Like, yeah, because it can't just be like, it's not like ECW owns reunions. Do you know what I mean? I think they definitely could do it. I don't think that would stop. It's just literally there's no talent left. Unfortunately, everyone's older now, and I mean Kevin Nash is around, but I don't know if he still wrestles. They just
acts, right?
Pretty much everyone is retired, I think, unfortunately. So
yeah,
but is there a way? So I know WCW is not a wrestler, so with the wrestlers, they can end up getting their flowers at the end of their career because they can get into the Hall of Fame, and that's kind of a celebration of them, right? But they couldn't really put WCW as a company into the Hall of Fame, and yeah, it just seems like you could say, oh, make like a documentary or something, but it just seems like every time they do a documentary, it's kind of always
has that
kind of crapping on WCW.
On it, yeah. Right. I don't think that's fair. Yeah, I don't think they should dredge WCW's body back up to do a reunion. I think it should be left dead. So whoever killed it, doesn't matter. You know, we talked about that. But the point is, it is dead. That's fine. These things happen. But I do think we should, when we do look back on it, hold it with a little more reverence than it seems like people do, because I actually don't know anybody personally who watched it who hates, like, who doesn't like it. Like, I feel like it was a very popular and warm thing. You know, I feel like people have good memories of it. So let's just keep those going, you know? And we can work on that by covering some decent pay-per-views as well. We did Halloween Havoc 97, which just absolutely rocked.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, more things like that would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, it did. WCW changed the landscape of professional wrestling in so many ways. It's kind of crazy to think that WCW was only around for, was it 12 years or something? Yeah. The impact that it had just on everything in pro wrestling. You just wonder what pro wrestling would be now without WCW. If it'd even be a thing now, it might not even be a thing now. WWF might have gone out of business and people might have lost interest if WCW wasn't a thing. So very interesting to see. Do you feel like this was the Eric Bischoff rehab show, or do you think that's not fair?
I get why people are saying that. It did feel a little bit, I'm not going to say pandering towards him, but they definitely wanted a sympathetic character, and who else could it like really be who's been there for that long?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
It could only be him, right? Like,
no, really? I agree. I'm going to ask is the whole overall series. It seems like you enjoyed it. Yeah. If you had to give the whole series a rating, what would you give it?
Probably a 3.5.
Okay, that's pretty solid.
Good. I think it's pretty solid. Yeah. If you think like 2.5 is average, I think it was above average. Again, like very easy to watch up until this episode, right? Easy to watch. fun talking heads. I think the selection that they did get, could it be better? Well, anything can be improved, right? But I think the heads that they did get were very interesting, very informative, good cast of characters. It's not the longest thing in the world. It's not going to rob you of too much of your life. It's a 4-episode like miniseries or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think 3.5 is pretty fair. What do you think? And it was slickly produced as well, and that used the real footage. Unlike I haven't seen it, but the Dark Side of the Ring used reenactments, right?
Yeah,
we were seeing like the real footage as they're talking, which helps illustrate things if you don't know these things very easily.
Yeah. Which I still don't know how they did that.
No, I don't.
They had footage from Beyond the Mat and all sorts. It was interesting. So for that reason, I'm probably going to give it a 3 stars. I thought it was enjoyable. It wasn't like some of these documentary series, like non-wrestling ones that I watch. I just can't wait to watch the next episode. Do you know what I mean? I get so heavily invested in them. I didn't get that from this, and I do wonder if it's just because I've heard all these stories before and I know the story. Maybe that's why, but it wasn't like I didn't watch one episode and finish it thinking, oh man, I can't wait for the next one. I did not have that at all.
Okay, I get that.
So for that reason, I'm not going to rank it as high as you, but overall, I felt like it did a decent job. I think people will look at it quite fondly. And if he only got one kind of new wrestling moment from the whole series, that's fine, because I do think that moment of Bischoff choking up was really cool and quite a nice little genuine moment. And I was happy they shared that with us. So yeah, overall for me, I thought better than average.
Pretty good, yeah. And a lot of times when I know I have to watch something for an episode coming up of the podcast, if it's like a really long pay-per-view and I know it's trash, I just think, oh god, I almost don't want to do it. These ones, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll happily throw on. It's a 40-minute easy watch with a colorful cast of characters. I think it's good.
Absolutely. Well, we hope this has been an easy listen for you, the listeners of the Chillin with the Villain podcast. Thank you for your support over the last year, a whole year of Chillin with the Villain. We thank you very much. We love you all. If you enjoyed the show, please follow us on the social media at The Villain Pod. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And if you really enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star review. That would really help out with the algorithm.
Or a 7-star.
Or 7 stars.
We'll take 7 stars.
If you leave us a review, we will read out your review on the show and give you a shout out. So we all win. But yeah, Sam, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Yep. Thank you very much for a good year, Marty, and all of the fans and listeners. And have a good year till next year.